Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a very special episode. I don't really do these much on my channel. I'm with Sh Hasan from Tampa. He's the founder of the Muslim Connection, known here as TMC. It's a masjid and it's a campus organization in USF, University of Southern Florida?
South Florida.
South Florida, okay, close.
No.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Sam, how you doing?
Good, good. I really like Sh Hasan because, I've been having some conversations with him, since I came. And the more I speak with him, the more I find that we're very like-minded. So I wanted to kind of pick his brain. He's been in this kind of work for way longer than I have been. So I wanted to see, what kind of insight you can provide on the Ummah, what kind of insight you can provide on Muslim work in the West. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the obstacles, some of the mistakes that people keep on repeating? So I'll just start off with your experience building a masjid here. For how long has it been?
So I would say it started way before me, like my, subhanAllah, late 1989, my dad finished his PhD. The whole idea was actually to move abroad, right? And subhanAllah, the things didn't happen, work out the way they're supposed to. The Gulf War took place, and there was an imam opening in the bigger masjid, the Masjid Jama, and my dad came here, subhanAllah. So practically grew up in the masjid environment for many, many years. So subhanAllah, in 2012, 2013, TMC was formed in the June of 2013, and the idea was to connect people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through community, educational, da'wah activities, but geared towards the revival of Islam, the understanding of what truly Islam is, more than just rituals, a bunch worship. Because what happens is many of the younger Muslims growing up, especially in the newer generation, are busy always seeing that Islam is the same as everything else. Islam is no different than anything else.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, why accept it or why follow it? And generally speaking, they didn't see that Islam can answer the tough questions or solve the world problems, because Islam is, we're always seen as trying to compromise or seek the help of those who bite you or those who are oppressing us to solve our problems.
Can you go a little bit more into detail on that? Like, what are situations where Muslims aren't able to kind of meet the intellectual challenge that you've had to address?
Some students, for example, would be in, let's say, go to a Muslim school or a public school, especially in a Muslim school, and go to college and take a philosophy class.
Yeah.
And this is like something they'll never have heard before, and everything they learn is automatically challenged. And they break down. They're like, wow, either feel enlightened, confused, enough, or doubt is caused. Because they're usually taught Islam is very simple, just follow this, don't think about things. Now they go to college, they're taking this class, and everything they learn is challenged. And then they feel Islam is not compatible, is not able to handle this. Not knowing that Islam is actually a worldview that can easily break down any of these arguments very simply, but the foundation is not there.
Yeah.
So then what happens, we find ourselves reacting, right, to these challenges instead of being proactive. So then in establishing a masjid, more than just another masjid, because we have, alhamdulillah, many masajid, but more than a place where we can establish the system, or help establish or call towards the system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth, revive the Islamic thought process, critical thinking, and make and understand where Islam is a worldview and solves everything and anything.
That's something that I experienced, because growing up, like, you learn your Islam from mama and baba, and you get like this elementary school understanding of Islam. But as you're going through life, you're learning, more and more advanced math, history, philosophy, but your understanding of Islam, it stays at that kind of like baby level.
Correct.
So when you get clashed with like modern philosophy, you crumble. You don't have anywhere to go. So what are your thoughts on Islamic education? Like, are people doing Islamic education correctly? What do you think? Do you think about these things?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like more than ever now, especially what's happening in the Muslim world, particularly in Gaza, Sudan, and Yemen, the silent Seneca, as they say in China, with the Uyghur Muslims. It's time for us to take ownership of our education.
Yeah.
Because every parent knows that their kids should know algebra by 8th grade or chemistry by 10th grade. What are the things our kids need to know as they're growing up, especially in our time, right?
Yeah.
What is the ideology of the LGBT movement? What does Islam say about, science? What does Islam say about politics? So all these things are happening. So then how do we take ownership of our education, but also knowing What is it that we need to do to produce Islamic identity? What is the Islamic personality composed of? And how do you view things through an Islamic lens? So then part of the colonization is to limit Islam to rituals. You want to pray, you want to fast Ramadan, but politically, you don't mind Muslims joining the army, right, and fighting their own brothers and sisters. You want to fast and give zakat and pray and all these different things, but you don't mind, for example, supporting, the billions of dollars that's killing Muslims in the Muslim world. So then there becomes a content dissonance where you see no problem, right? That Islam has become limited to some morals and principles, but then the same students will question the marriage of Aisha, right? So even from the ethical perspective, what is ethics? What is morality?
Yeah.
What is Islam? So even that, it was been taught in a very limited way. Just be a good person and say, but many think they can become good without Islam, or they can do all these things without Islam. So then Islam just becomes, for many, a bunch of rules that makes their life hard, right? And that limits their growth in life. And it's like a good feel motivation every now and then. I need it to feel good, that's when I'm feeling a little guilty. I'll throw in a lecture, a 2-minute video, but actual change, actual revival, actual himma for Islam. And I think you mentioned this to me a couple of days ago. Is that, let's say for example, a 10-year-old went to their mom and said, I don't feel like going to math class tomorrow. Right? It's very boring, teacher's mean. And the parent would say, absolutely not. There's no choice. You have no choice. Right? It's not even an option, not even something that they can think about for a second. Now, if you ask somebody, hey, are you going to halaqah? Maybe, right?
Yeah.
So when we feel that, especially in our time where I believe halaqahs and lectures and attending, having Islam education is a fard ayn in many aspects for us, and a fard kifaya to establish these circles of knowledge. It's not even in the back burner. If you can go months without attending a halaqah, a lecture, or even a salah in the masjid, because they're feeling that this is a part of them. So then the same kid grows up saying it's okay to miss Jum'ah, it's okay to deal in interest, it's okay, to be in debt and so forth, because Islam was more of this something, a ritual or spiritual thing, but not how your life should be centered around.
One of the things that I think I run into constantly is that there's a mindset that the Jannah is easy. And so like once you understand that and you think that, okay, there's like this little checkbox, there's this little checklist I have for getting into Jannah, I feel that describes a lot of like the unseriousness of how we approach like the halaqah or Islamic education. What's your experience with that?
The checkbox, that's actually a good point. Now, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when asked by a Bedouin about doing the pillars of Islam and entering paradise.
This one has given many people headaches.
And then you have Mu'adh bin Jabal asked a similar question and be told about, controlling anger, tahajjud, jihad fi sabilillah, and so forth, more in depth.
Yeah.
So knowing where the people are at is very important.
Yeah.
Right? So for example, let's say I want to talk about the economical system in Islam, but then most of the people you're talking don't even know what Islam is, or that Islam even has an economic system. So you have to kind of go from the ground up with many and understanding that's what the Prophet ﷺ knew who he was addressing, right?
Okay.
So for us to understand, okay, let's say for example we're addressing the students where, hey, Islam is not just a bunch of do's and don'ts, right? It's not just a bunch of, hey, checkbox, as you would say, and avoid certain things. Even sometimes they look at it from a cultural perspective, but more of it's a complete way of life and how to view life and live life. So then from that angle, then you realize it's not about checkpoints more than it is the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in Mecca, right, had many outlets, right? Abu Sufyan would say can be considered at that time before he accepted Islam the lesser of two evil. He could have just said, what, he's nicer than Abu Jahl. But there was an actual movement to establish Islam in Medina, right? And without conditions set by anyone else. It has to be where the Prophet ﷺ is the one who set the condition where they can live as Muslims without any preconditions. Even if it meant at that time that, hey, this will be a better life than the one they had. They were boycotted, they were tortured. So then a part of the education system, as growing up as Muslim, you realize it's not a checkbox. You realize that struggle is a part of life. Right? Going through tough times is a part of life. Leaving your comfort zone is a part of the education. All right? It's not like, hey, I learned algebra one period, I'm gonna learn Islamic studies the other. It's all the same for a grade, right? And by 305, where school's over, I'm living my actual life,
Yeah.
right? Whereas no, and now a lot of times that checkbox also, when you study Islam, especially, you don't see the effects of it right away. Now, when people study Quran, the one thing that people like about it is because they can see the effects of it, right? Oh, my son memorized 10 ayahs. Islam for them is like, what is this Islam? Why do you have to go in depth? And that's why it's not taken as serious, or one of the reasons it's not.
When you speak about like the ground up, like you need to start from the ground up. What does that look like? What is the ground floor of when you go and speak to the youth here in Tampa or wherever, and you're dealing with these issues? How does one get introduced to the idea of Islam?
It's a very good question. Of course, everyone has different levels of thought processes and so forth, but I'd say generally speaking, is establishing the aqid and the foundation, right, and the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the yaqeen and certainty in that, and establishing that Allah is the only one worthy of worship. He is the legislator. He's the only one who has the right to tell us what to do. It is only Allah. Without Allah, there is no morality. There is no good and bad. Right? The concept of connecting this to akhirah, to the afterlife. That, hey, I can't just do whatever I want. So establishing that foundation, then realizing that Allah is the most just, right? That when you accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, things may logically not make sense, but what makes sense is that Allah is the creator. Allah knows us more than we know ourselves and is closer to us than our own jugular vein. So establishing that in the beginning helps everything. But a lot of times people start, hey, this is haram, this is wrong, don't do this, but they're not knowing why they do it, all right? And then realizing that in order to do a lot of these things, you need to establish the system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
We're limited in what we can do, right? So then you realize that there has to be, and you can't do it individually.
Yeah.
You have to do it as a team, collectively.
Yeah.
So then you start to build that, realize that, hey, we can't live as individualistic, we can't be capitalistic, hey, it's all about myself, my car, my house, my investments, and forget about everyone else, all right? That I may have ethics of going to work on time in the morning, but I don't mind people sleeping on the street, and I could care less about them.
Yeah.
So then how do you establish where Islam teaches that يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, that they're willing to sacrifice what they have, even if it brings them a little of difficulty, to help others. And you will see this during one of the battles of the Prophet Muhammad, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when the three companions, they'll pass the water to the other individual, right? And now when you have a hurricane, everyone wants to take all the water for themselves, as if tomorrow is Yawm al-Qiyamah. But there was that sense where they didn't have a hadith book with them, or they can just go anywhere and look up an ayah. They actually were taught these principles, right? These foundational things, where they loved each other truly as brothers and sisters through the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that stems, that building that foundation is very important. That's why I always tell parents, if you establish that, then they want to learn Quran on their own, they want to come to the halaqah on their own. But we're so busy wanting results, and so much in a weekend school, in a full-time school, realizing this is a lifelong effort, from the cradle to the grave.
Wallahi, it's so true, and I really like what you started with. Because when I sometimes, I give a halaqah or whatever it is, about, the aqeedah of Islam, and I get political, and people have this impression that this is something advanced. They have this impression that, well, hold on, brother, and I've had this debate with many people who are in Islamic work and MSAs. They say, we need to start with the basics of the fiqh. It's the basics of prayer, the basics of tahara. And sure, these are basics, but more basic than that is what you just said, which is the aqeedah foundation from which that sharia, that fiqh emanates from.
Of course.
Right? And without that, like you said, it becomes you're grabbing the youth to these actions that they don't understand where they come from. It just becomes like you said, a basket of rules and regulations.
Not only that, because nowadays young brothers and sisters, unlike before, they're exposed to stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
So then they see Muslims bashing Muslims bashing the fiqh of other Muslims. So then some students go to some institutes to become more advanced in some fiqh issues, but then without that foundation, Muslims start hating Muslims. And what more does the West want than that?
Yeah.
Right? It's hey, if we can get the knowledgeable people of Islam to not even talk to each other, and use Islam for them as a sword against each other, right? وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ أُورِثُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ بَعْدِهِمْ لَفِي شَكٍّ مِّنْهُ مُرِيبٍ. Allah says, then the people that will come after them, the generation, will start to have shak in their deen, doubt their deen, because the supposed people of knowledge are disagreeing. And then even when they teach aqeedah, they'll bring some points that they know everyone will differ about, and they'll create an argument so strong that they'll convince a 13-year-old, look, this guy, he's not even Muslim, right? So establishing that foundation is so key, right? Because then once they want to do it on their own, they'll blossom in the other aspects, on other fields, right? And they realize it's not only about them learning, it's the wajib and the obligation of us giving da'wah. And da'wah is not the slogan just to get people to become Muslim, rather it's the idea Islam is the only salvation. Inna deen 'inda Allah al-Islam. There is no other accepted way of life except the way Allah has prescribed for us, which is Islam.
Now I'm going to ask you this question as someone who's probably dealt with this a lot as a leader, which is, how do we actually cut through that noise of like, because the sectarianism and the focus on petty issues is everywhere. Okay, we build the foundation, but people aren't ready to listen, unfortunately, many times. And once they get into that like trap of the aqidah wars or whatever it is, it becomes very hard to pull people out.
That's actually a very good point, because you have the channels of shahawat and shubahat, the channels of desires and doubts.
Yeah.
And doubts, I would say, is more dangerous because people go through desires, we're constantly dealing with them. But that if you have the foundation is correct, then I'm not going to justify it. I'm going to try to make tawbah and so forth. With doubts, you leave the deen altogether. May Allah protect us and protect our kids from that. That being said, I believe what I'm seeing through our time is that we always have to, if you got a PhD 30 years ago, it's irrelevant today.
Yeah.
You have to understand how the corporations work, how the society is working, how things are functioning. So how the principles stay the same, but the methodology of da'wah, of how it's done, we always have to be aware of what's more effective in our community. So I realized getting into those debates and spending time takes energy away from the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Making yourself stronger in the da'wah, financially investing in ourselves, getting people to believe in the idea, and being consistent is always key, and not looking at success or measuring only by numbers.
Yeah.
But rather, because one person can affect 1,000 people, right? Or you can have 10,000 people that just wanted to be entertained for a couple hours about some Islamic topic.
Yeah.
So you want to bring true change in society, develop mentors and leaders and khatibs. So then that takes investment. So I've seen that, many of the da'is now are growing older. Some of them have passed away. And one of the end of time is that knowledge will be taken away by the death of those who have knowledge. And now many scholars can pass away and no one knows their names. Right? So then how do we preserve it for generations to come? So I think it more is that those who are established and alhamdulillah are wanting to do da'wah and spread this idea, I think we need to come together, work together, put our energy together, because together we're stronger. And not everyone has to be the same, but the idea is and invest in it and be consistent with these goals.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been thinking about recently is that, Islamic work in the West, it's been happening for a long time. We've been teaching people for a long time, doing da'wah for a long time. What is this meant to build up to? Like, what is if there is a tipping point that all of this is meant to kind of take us to, how is our work, how is work in general, Islamic work in general, how does that lead to some permanent change that doesn't just evaporate with our generation and then the next generation just does the same thing that you're doing and then their kids do the same thing and we're just kind of like, in this cycle?
Yeah, so the results are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So da'wah is always key, that Allah use us and not replace us. Allahumma staqdimna wa la tastabdilna. And understanding that Allah guides us to what's best, right? Like when the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when Allah sent an angel to destroy a village, and came back and there was a Zahid, and he said start with him because he saw corruption around him and did nothing about it. The Muslims in Mecca were doing da'wah for 13 years and not many accepted. And then we have Mus'ab ibn Umair, thousands accept right, under him. So the seeds you plant today, you may not see them blossom right, with us. But you have to plant today because change is not going to happen overnight. Right? So that vision has to be clear, is that, hey, if it was established a masjid, we have many masajid that hasn't, if it was the schools are there.
Yeah.
But now these school masajid have been able, or many have been serving the agenda of the West.
Yeah.
Right, which to indoctrinate our kids to learn more about the system and fall in love with the society and the ideas, whether through social studies, scientific studies, and all this, all right, and see them more valuable than even what Islam is. And Islam is limited to a couple of subject matters, and the kids know that it doesn't even count towards their GPA. So they can give slogans about 3D, 5D, they can give all these slogans about we're doing this project or whatever, But when Islam is not looked upon as a way of life, so then I look at TMC, right? Say what can we measure? So on campus, for example, I feel the presence is not to have another organization, but rather you are the pillar that stands against the batil. All right,
Yeah.
you are that say, hey, we're not going to compromise our deen. All right, and especially now what's happening in Gaza is very sad. Is that schools are starting and there's no discussion about what we're going to do now. Right? How are we going to develop our kids to realize that this can happen to us tomorrow? And it's happening to us here, but in a different way. That we're being bombarded, our kids are being bombarded with, thoughts other than Islam, and they're going up, right? As you know, they said, سَنَخْرِجُ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ بِعَقُولٍ إِنْجِلِيزِيٍّ. When the Muslims defeated the Crusaders, Lois and I said, we can't defeat them militarily, but we can have their kids think like us, right? So then they started with, building a university next to Al-Azhar University. They started with, the education system. And here, it's like, you know what, we can have phones, technology, but on the other hand, we'll have the Muslim teachers make a kid feel that, this system, this society, this democracy is the best way. So then if you were doing things under this premise, it's actually going to go backwards and only get worse. So then, on the other end, we have to at least be that voice that lets people know that, hey, no, you know what, this is not, there is an Islamic way of life, there is a salvation, there is, an alternative to what you see in society. So then that measure, right, you're going to get a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
You're going to get a lot of people that, will label you as people like to label nowadays. So then for generations to come is to make sure that that idea is strong, all right, that, hey, we're establishing something, it's not going to be today or tomorrow, it's going to take a process, all right, it's going to take patience. If Nuh alayhi salam gave da'wah for 950 years and not many accepted, but he's still successful, all right, and that's how we have to look at that. Allah says, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ, let there be amongst you a group that commands the good and forbids the evil, enjoins what is khair, right, and forbids what is evil. So if you go a day without being challenged or realizing that you feel comfortable not confronting the ideas that are being taught to our kids in society, then there's a problem. Because there is a constant battle between haqq and batil, truth and falsehood. So Muslims should never ever really feel comfortable, and especially in a society like this. So then we've made it seem where, no, this society is good, they let you do these couple of rituals and prayers. They're bombing our brothers and sisters abroad, they're destroying Muslim lands. It's all good, right? As long as you live the American dream, right? You get these AP classes, spend extra money on it, you take the SAT scores, right? Do all these things to be a true American. And now parents will come and say to me, I will give up all of this life to live in a village overseas, so my son or daughter just want to hear the adhan and appreciate the word Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But many have to go through that cycle. So then at least so going back to the point or question you're asking, is we have to have these conversations.
Yeah.
We have to sit together, because we're not sitting together as Muslims. All right.
Yeah.
Every now and then a speaker may come, people gather together, feel good, leave. But to actually have the uncomfortable conversations, right? Developing curriculums that are needed in our time, spending all our wealth and money to produce this, but then how do you create that sense of urgency? How do you create that this is an obligation? How do you produce that? And this is where I believe that we have to think deeply of how do we get the masses to realize there was an issue. Now in 2010, 11, when the Arab Spring started, right, many were tired of the young brothers and sisters of the oppression. So they went to Egypt and then in Tunisia and other parts of the Muslim land. You see what's happening in Syria now, right? Now, the one thing is there was no clear vision to establish Islam, right? It was against the oppression and so forth. But you see, when they gathered together, the youth, what happened, right? So dictatorships are never going to be the same for a while in the Muslim. It's not like before, right? When one person, right, can control the masses right now, right, is different.
I was with some of your students last night, and I saw one of them. He was wearing a TMC shirt. On the back, you have a few slogans. So one of them, I don't remember much of them, like "Be humble" or something like that. But one of them, the one that caught me, was "Act fearlessly," right? And that was my favorite one. I told him that's my favorite one on the back of your shirt there. How do you develop that in people? We have, I think the West. I'm from Canada. Canada, I think we have especially meek people. But maybe Americans are a little bit more, blunt, a little bit more frank, and I really appreciate that in them. But what do you do to like create that mindset, that temperament, that like fearless attitude in a Muslim? Because they need that to be able to
Yeah.
like
So Ibn
represent Islam.
Qayyim, he said there's four main characteristics to establish an individual, or the four main aspects of character, right? And one of them is shaja'a, right? The other one is al-adl, right? Now, if you look at shaja'a, courage, once you have courage, you can have tawakkul, right? So the person who has the idea that Allah controls my risk, right? Allah says, فَامْشُوا فِي مَنَاكِبِهَا وَكُلُوا مِنْ رِزْقِهِ وَإِلَيْهِ النُّشُورُ. Seek it, walk towards it, but know at the end of the day you're going to return to Allah. Now somebody may fear, if I don't sell alcohol in the gas station, I'm going to lose money. If I don't sell this in THC in a smoke shop, my business won't succeed. Right? If I don't deal in interest, I won't make more. I won't have this investment. So then that shaja, that courage to take that step. Right? The same way Hajar anha in the desert between Safa and Marwa, when she was left, she said, "Ruditu billah." Whatever Allah commands, I accept. Yeah. And then Zamzam came out. The same way Umar Khattab anhu overheard the conversation between the mother and the daughter and adding water to the milk, and that moment of taqwa was a seed to her grandson, Umar ibn Aziz being the Khalifa, where they ended poverty. Right? So then, when it comes to personal, business, and careers, is that we have to truly have tawakkul. That, hey, my hijab is not going to affect my career. Right? Because we have that fear we instill in ourselves, and especially a lot of it has come from abroad. In our khutbahs, like our khutbahs are very similar to lectures of khutbahs of overseas, right? Let's talk about these subjects, ignore reality as if it doesn't exist. So that's one thing. Number two is that so there's a difference between being fearless and being reckless, right? Because a lot of individuals can get reckless is having mentorship and leadership that you follow, right? That hey, you're not acting on your own. So then being fearless with leadership, with mentorship. So whether it be, if you're a good writer online, how to orchestrate ideas and present it without having that fear, I'm going to lose followers, all right, or I'm going to lose my job. When it comes to da'wah, teaching young kids from a young age, I think going this to a da'wah table, saying how, like learning the idea, you get rejected, it's okay.
Yeah.
But you're carrying something very heavy. Right, this is a part of your mission. We train our kids that, hey, you're going to get a $500,000 loan to go to medical school, you do all this, and they overcome anything to get that far. Many come abroad, right, give up everything to fulfill that goal. So there is the ability to do it, but with Islam, when it becomes and understand that this is our main purpose of life, why we were created, and will be asked about on the Day of Judgment, then working as a jama'ah, supporting each other, slowly eliminates that fear that has been ingested into many of us from a young age. I'll say personally, working within the masjid school, they put fear in you, right? You comply, you're out, right? You talk about overseas here, same thing. It's like, you have to follow the system or individual in place, and that's why many of the schools here locally, especially, they don't hire thinkers. It's like, hey, the more corrupt you are, the more up you go in the masjid or school, right? The more corruption you're involved in, like as long as you say yes, sir, you're on. All right. So then the idea is that understanding that Allah is in control, having the true sense of tawakkul, encouraged like Ibtihad did at Microsoft. The day she got promoted, she stood up, she got fired, but Allah opened different doors for her. All right. The sister who started Salam Column went against the drift of Coca-Cola, right? Not only was boycotting, but now you're standing against, you're developing something different. In the beginning, everybody said that's crazy. So these are some examples when it comes to that.
What you mentioned about working in a jama'ah, working on a team, I think that's so critical. But many in the ummah have some wrong concepts about the concept of jama'ah. And I think that there has been an effort to atomize us so that we're not working together. And part of it is like regime propaganda, jama'ah, just call yourself Muslim and don't attach yourself to treating teams as though they're sects. But we know that nothing big gets done in life unless we come together and fill in each other's gaps and organize and have leadership and planning and structure and treat this ummah like a serious project. So how do you think that we can overcome this kind of reticence towards working in a jama'ah?
I think it's a very good question. I think in these many podcasts, I think we as individuals, I make mistakes in my da'wah. I made mistakes as a leader. being transparent, realizing that we are humans.
Yeah.
A lot of things are based upon ijtihad. Realizing that if somebody disagrees with you and their disagreement is valid within the domain of Islam, so I think the history of Jama'as and what has happened in the past 50, 60 years has affected many people's perception
Yeah.
of working with any Jama'ah or group. So I think the idea of being more open, more transparent, and not making it where, hey, if you join us, you have to hate everyone else, right? If you work with
Partisanship.
us, you can't talk to these people, right? You can't talk. No, once you have that filter process established, the critical thinking, and the foundation is strong. So I think a lot of times, because it could be too extreme. Like I see a lot of the young brothers and sisters that join and go to institutes. A lot of them sometimes they were lonely, or they don't have a big social network, so they gravitate towards something. They want something to belong to. But you don't want to have a gang mentality within Islam or within Muslim community. So I think revamping or bringing the idea of starting from the ground up, like what I3 is doing, I think is really good work. And many would always ask when they watch any podcast, like, hey, we talked about some of the challenges, what are some of the solutions? So I think one of these things is that we could take from this is that anyone who's listening to this, that how important it is to work as a jama'ah, to work together.
Yeah.
And we will disagree.
Yeah.
And somebody may disagree with a lot of stuff I have to say, right? But we have to be at the table discussing with each other. Before we talk about going to the politicians and we want to talk to everyone, right? We can't even talk to each other. We want to talk about changing the government. We can't even change our own masjid boards, all right?
Yeah.
So it's like, so I think the idea is that having these conversations, really creating a vision, right? And then believing in each other, because we have more resources in the community than ever before. We have more Muslims than ever before. All these things, masajid, but then there's less change, and it's less effective. It's like the foam of the ocean. Why is that? So I think working and sitting together, and this beyond the halaqas, halaqas are important in the circles, but they have to be with a vision for long-term planning. So I think this is a great opportunity that we got to meet,
Yeah.
just to do this podcast. Hopefully, this is the beginning of many, inshallah, future gatherings and conversations.
Absolutely, and barakallah feek. I think that's a great note to end on. It was a pleasure speaking to our Sheikh Hasan here in Tampa, and hopefully the first of many. Assalamu
Inshallah.
alaikum.
Thanks.